The Nigerian Nightmare returns to the octagon on short notice to take on Khamzat Chimaev in Abu Dhabi UFC 294. These two welterweights will face off at middleweight for this. And it's such a blockbuster move that a title shot to the winner is guaranteed. Chimaev's move up a weight class not surprising given his trouble making weight. Dana White's comments earlier in the year. Usman in after Paulo Costa out after an elbow infection. Let's get to the main event. Another late addition to the card, UFC featherweight champ Alexander Volkanovski takes on lightweight strap holder Islam Makhachev in a rematch. Volkanovski in after Charles Oliveira got removed from the fight after got a cut above his eye that was pretty serious less than a couple weeks ago. Now, the two fought back in February in Australia, UFC 284. It went the distance. Here's Volkanovski coming to this one with a distinct frame of mind.
There's a lot of pressure on him, but no pressure on me. I'm not letting there be any pressure, but there's still a lot to lose for me. So I don't want people acting like, that there's no, me doing this is a no-brainer. I guarantee you there's not many fighters that are going to do this. And you heard Islam say, no excuses and things like this. It's just one thing I want to say is put it this way, 100% if the roles were reversed, this fight is not happening. I don't care what anyone says. He's not fighting on 12 days' notice. So he needs to remember that.
So we're gearing up for UAE to host another UFC. And for Makhachev and Volkanovski, Volkanovski lost as this one, as I mentioned, went the distance. Makhachev winning via decision. All right, let's bring in the guys from Morning Combat, Luke, Thomas and Brian Campbell. Luke, I'll start with you first. What are we looking out for here in this Makhachev-Volkanovski rematch?
By the way, you heard Volkanovski say if he was having to take this fight on 12 days' notice, he wouldn't do it. Also, I should be noted, Makhachev is taking this fight on 12 days' notice. I mean, he had the camp before, but he's having an opponent switch at the last minute here as well. Okay, but to answer the question, what are we looking for? The big surprise in both directions in the first fight was that Volkanovski was able to nullify a fair amount of the grappling of Makhachev. Not enough to win enough rounds to win, but certainly beyond expectations. Conversely, the other big surprise in the first fight was how well Makhachev did on the feet, dropping the featherweight champion at some point early in that fight as well. And so the question here is how many adjustments can they make in either direction to make up some ground? I want to be very clear with the folks here. 12 days notice, even if he was working out before, is not going to be great for Volkanovski over the long haul, especially considering he was really good in the fifth round of their first fight and Makhachev wasn't. Conversely, Makhachev is also huge for this weight class. The weight cut that he's going to experience is going to be a bit of an X factor. But what I'm looking for here is I just don't believe that Volkanovski can do so well in the wrestling that early on he can hold down Makhachev and really do damage. But I'm looking for him to be even better potentially in terms of his wrestling defense, his ability to get up, his ability to negate back control, for example. And I also want to see, he had more volume in the first fight, but he's going to need even more than that early. If he does have a compromised gas tank, I'm looking to see if he can put pressure on Makhachev early and then to what extent he can withstand that.
Yeah, I think the whole theme about the potential of a compromised gas tank really carries the theme in terms of which way you're going to lean on this. Yes, short notice turnaround for both. Yes, Makhachev was preparing for Charles Oliveira, a completely different fighter. Do we believe, though, everything Volkanovski's saying, or is there elements of gamesmanship with how willing and open he said, look, I haven't been in championship level shape. I've been in the gym, but I haven't been training on this level. Because of that, I need to tailor my game. I need to go for the finish early. He's the smaller fighter that typically he's not known as a one-punch knockout threat. You would think isn't the right choice to go. But either Volkanovski is playing with us a little bit to set up some type of style change off of that first fight, making some adjustments that he saw the first time around, or everything's right on with what he's saying, and he may have to become the bigger fighter and be the slugger. Hard to say and do when you're the featherweight moving up, and I know his history isn't with knockouts, but one thing about Volkanovski that makes this wild card situation interesting, he gets better every fight. He's 35 years old, yes, but he's the #1 pound-for-pound best in the world, even though he lost recently to the #2 Islam Makhachev. And the reason is he's completely well-rounded, and we've yet to see how great he can actually be. Gas tank, no gas tank. Volkanovski is a live one in this fight. And I have to agree with his daring nature of knowing, hey, I'm 35, the window's small. If I can do this rematch right now under any circumstances, the competitor in me won't let that go. I think that matters in how you gauge his chances entering this.
So let's continue with the storylines, and we'll get to predictions in just a bit. But BC, I'm going to have you start here with the co-main. We have Kamaru Usman and Khamzat Chimaev. I wonder how many times you and Luke on Morning Combat talked about this at 170. We're going to get it at middleweight here. What are your thoughts coming into, again, short notice, big fight?
Well, this fight has really doubled down on the importance since UFC President Dana White announced the winner will get a middleweight title shot against Sean Strickland, who has history having once lost to Usman. But I think the whole storyline in terms of what this fight will look like and who wins, it surrounds Kamaru Usman, and it's not just moving up to the middleweight division for the first time, fresh off of 2 consecutive welterweight title losses to Leon Edwards. It's the fact that he's 36 years old, the fact that rumors persist that maybe his knees, maybe his legs, not fully healthy. There was a public workout in the last 24 hours in Abu Dhabi where some people think they heard him say on camera when he's rolling around with teammate Justin Gaethje that he popped something. You have a potential for injury concern, and you have a man whose style used to be about taking people down and gassing them out and overwhelming them. Can he still employ that style at 36 against one of the most dangerous, vicious, and destructive opponents? Look, you see those betting odds, they're putting respect on Usman's name. I'm just not sure that same Usman is still around.
Yeah, BC is articulating what really matters here. I mean, just think about it. If you had to fight Khamzat Chimaev, one of the hottest rising contenders, irrespective of weight class in the UFC, would you want to do it on 12 days notice, potentially injured, up a weight class? I mean, that seems like an insanely tall order to do. Now, we don't know for a fact if he's injured, but again, that video that BC is referencing, you can hear him say something popped when he was rolling around with Justin Gaethje. If he goes into the fight compromised like that, I just don't know what kind of chance he would have. That said, there are some interesting things to think about with Khamzat Chimaev. Number one, he has been off for a very long time, right? We're talking well over a year, not quite 2. But this is not some guy who's been keeping, you know, a very active schedule. And he's been fighting this fight you see here with Kevin Holland at 180-pound catch weight. Before that, welterweight. And in this fight, as you can see here with Gilbert Burns, who's the toughest fighter I think he's faced to date. Listen, he did not fight Khamzat Chimaev a very strategic fight at all. There were a lot of times where he decided to kind of stand and bang or recklessly pursue attacks that were very low percentage that got him into a little bit of trouble, that made that fight maybe a little more competitive perhaps than it should have been. His fight IQ is not so much in question, but he is such an aggro force that sometimes he has a little bit of difficulty channeling it in a bit of a more strategic direction. I don't know if those factors ultimately will undermine his effort. But what I would say is if you're a Kamaru Usman fan, those would be a couple of things I'd be paying attention to.
So given the circumstances, yet the quality of the fights we're going to have here, I do want to ask you guys how you think it's all going to play out. So, for instance, Makhachev and Chimaev are roughly the same favorites. Volkanovski and Usman are roughly the same underdogs. Do you go both chalk, or are either of you guys brave enough to go both underdogs? We'll go Luke first and then BC.
In this particular instance, I am not so brave, if bravery can be defined as making poor choices, I have to say. In this case, listen, it's not that you don't think Volkanovski can do it. If anybody can do it, it is Volkanovski. I think that main event is still very competitive, but we're talking about Islam Makhachev, and we're saying what would be Volkanovski's chances if he had a full camp? I don't know. They'd probably be pretty good. That's not the world we live in, and for those reasons, I'm going to go for Makhachev. And by the way, I rewatched the first fight, and I think he won that one 4 rounds to 1, even though I grant certainly there was a bit of a back and forth that perhaps the score can't fully capture. In that co-main event, again, there's just not a lot of great reasons, I would say, to think that Kamaru Usman can get it done. So give me Chimaev in that fight. I like the guys whose name end in the letter V.
Well, V is for victory, and I have to echo your Chimaev pick. Not only do I like him huge, I think it's by early knockout. I think he absolutely overwhelms and devastates Usman, who just recently was pound for pound #1 on a 15-fight win streak, so you know how crazy this game can be. But you want to talk about crazy? Let's get crazy here in this main event. He said it himself, right? Volkanovski, very few people in his spot, very few defending champions would take this kind of risk on short notice, division up, all that, and said, and he's right. I think even fewer can pull it off. The problem is, I think he can pull it off. Volkanovski has surprised me at every turn, including the performance he put earlier this year against Makhachev in the first fight, where he shocked us in neutralizing certain aspects of the wrestling and shocked me in his ability on the feet to drop and wobble Makhachev in separate instances. Is it going to take a lot on short notice? Yes. But I don't think he's accepting this fight unless he believes that the conditions are optimal enough to make it happen. Yes, he's doubling down, playing with house money, whatever you want to say. But if anyone can do it, it's Volkanovski. And if he does, you're going to have to make room for him at the upper table of the greatest fighters to ever step into the cage, because what he's trying to do, only the greatest can pull off. And if we find out he does on Saturday, he'll be one of those, the greatest. Absolutely. This is for so much critical stake in his future legacy.
All right, Brian, thank you. Luke, thank you. The guys from the award-winning Morning Combat. Scan that QR code. Check out the guys' room service diaries on their latest pod. But again, this is a monster card, not only about the two fights we talked about, Ankalaev Walker, other names as well, like Nurmagomedov. Should be a good one this weekend.